What I'm excited to talk to you about is the LOIs, because they're like wet cement. They harden fast.
Yep.
So David, what should sellers absolutely push to include before signing?
Well, I always just say as much as possible, but there's a limit. It's not going to be 100 pages long. So obviously, purchase price and how it's divided up between equity and cash, net working capital in as much detail as possible.
Yeah, sharpen your pencil on that one.
Yeah, you really have to, because it can mean millions of dollars. It's so easy to gloss over. It's usually a glossed over phrase, a normalized net working capital adjustment. And it literally can mean millions of dollars, depending on all sorts of things, what's included in net working capital, what the net working capital target is, what methodologies are used to determine it. So as much as you can put in the term in the LOI on that, for sure. If you are having a mixed cash and equity deal, what is the value of the equity?
Mm-hmm.
How that's determined needs to be in the LOI. It's a negotiable term, whether it's a privately held buyer or a publicly traded buyer. You definitely want indemnification terms. If you're a private company seller, you're going to be indemnifying the buyer for all sorts of things that might happen post acquisition. Usually the main one is breaches of various reps and warranties.
David, stupid question. Can you explain, like I'm a 5-year-old, what indemnification means?
Yeah, sure. So in any purchase agreement, you, the selling company, are going to make certain reps and warranties about the company, saying, we don't infringe anyone's IP and we're not breaking laws and things like that. But dozens of pages of them.
It can be a really long list.
Like I think a huge list.
I think the transaction we did, it was like 70 pages.
Yep, that's not unusual. And so then, what does the buyer get if some of those reps and warranties end up being untrue? Well, it's called an indemnification obligation. So the sellers, or really the seller stockholders, agree to make the buyer whole for any losses they experience as a result of a rep or warranty being untrue. That usually comes in two different ways. One is, let's take the example of the infringing IP. So the buyer gets sued for IP infringement resulting from the use of seller's IP. Well, then the seller stockholders pay for the attorney's fees for the buyer to defend itself. They pay for whatever judgment there is. So those are kind of third-party claim indemnification. But then there's what one would call like direct claim indemnification, where, say, you're repping that there's no material bugs in your software. And it turns out there's some horrible bugs in it that the buyer has to fix, and it costs them $500,000 in man hours and the like to do it. Then you pay for that, like those kind of re-engineering costs. So the question then becomes, from an LOI standpoint, what are the extent of your indemnification obligations? Are there caps? There will always be some sort of caps. So this is the time to negotiate them. And are there different caps for different things? How long does the buyer have to go after the seller? You want it to be as short as possible. Maybe within a year of the acquisition, they can go after you, but not longer than that. If you leave it silent, it's not going to be in your favor later. And usually it'll be pretty silent in the buyer's initial drafts. And then if there's any kind of retentions or holdbacks of any sort, particularly for putting aside indemnity reasons, but for service providers, what the terms are, any kind of acceleration if you're terminated without cause. Honestly, I put the definition of cause into the LOI. I don't just say acceleration for termination without cause. I say what cause means, because you'll get a better answer at that point than you will if you wait till after the LOI.
Anything else that sellers should absolutely push to include?
Any terms related to an earnout. If there's going to be an earnout, any protections that you as a seller have with respect to an earnout should be in that document.
And you should clearly define the metrics related to that earnout.
Yeah. So you want the earnout spelled in as much detail as you possibly can.
And what I've noticed is that bankers want the LOI signed really fast, and then the lawyers want to fully lard it.
Yeah.
And CFOs, I mean, they get stuck kind of in the middle, right? Where, like, how do you help them decide what's worth pushing for?
So the incentives on the part of the lawyers and the bankers are completely different. So at all times, this is not just an LOI thing. This is going to be at all times in the process. The banker is going to want this deal to close as quickly as possible. And the lawyers don't really have any incentive for that to happen. And there's pejorative ways of looking at that, and there are not so pejorative ways of looking at that. You know, the bankers only get paid if the deal closes. The lawyers get usually paid by the hour. And if it stretches out longer, it's better for them. So that's the pejorative way. But there's a less pejorative way. I mean, bankers, you know, they're there. You want a banker who's there to get the deal done.
Yeah.
And you want a lawyer who's there who can perceive risk and try to protect you from it. There's not really that much for the CFO to do in terms of the banker. You hear the banker out. Maybe it's my own bias. I would push on the lawyer in a sense if I'm the CFO. And let's put aside, you need to get them to explain risks. Any risks where they're saying, we need to delay this, negotiate this more. Try to get them to not quantify the risk in dollars. They're going to have a hard time doing that. But like realistically, what are the chances of this happening? How many times have you seen XYZ happen?
That's a great question. How many times have you seen it?
You want to get the lawyers into the real world. I don't blame them for the fact, you know, maybe because I'm a lawyer, I don't blame them for the fact that they can be a bit theoretical about things because everything is about hypotheticals. But as the CFO, you need to make the risk decisions. And so you need to get them into the real world and you kind of level set them.
What are some other inherent conflicts that lawyers and bankers will have?
Essentially, bankers want to do anything that's quick. So the problem there is it might mean not disclosing certain things or not necessarily telling all the internal. It's just kind of whatever gets the deal done as quickly as possible. And that shows itself in all sorts of different ways. It does in terms of what you negotiate and what you don't negotiate, what I's you dot and T's you cross, while the lawyers are going to want to do all of those things. It doesn't show itself in just in one way. But that is the inherent conflict. It's one source of conflict.
And if you're a CFO or a CEO who wants to politely say, thanks for the advice, banker, but I'm going with my lawyer on this one, what's the right way to broach that or communicate that?
Bankers are used to kind of aggressive. I mean, they're like lawyers in that sense. Don't worry about it. They're used to it. And so are the lawyers. You just gotta, that's not really worth your worrying about. Be polite. I mean, be a nice person, but almost certainly going to happen. Like, I rarely see deals on any side of them where there is not some time where bankers and lawyers are giving very different advice.
Run the Numbers is a mostly LLC production. Yelling an intro by Fat Joe. Artwork by some AI thingamajig. Podcast and video editing is done by Cleancast at cleancast.io. Nothing said on this podcast is intended to be business or investment advice. It's the sole opinion of me, a guy who feeds his dog too much ice cream and has a history of net operating losses, LOL. If you like this podcast, please hit subscribe. It would mean a lot to me. And also check out mostlymetrics.com. That's my newsletter where I explore business models and financial metrics. Thanks for riding with me. Share this with your friends. Peace.